Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy daily newspaper analysis. Today is 31st July 2024 and today we have some important articles from different newspapers. So in this session we will try to discuss all those important articles one by one, and they are very important and relevant for the exam, for both prelims and mains examination. These articles that we are going to discuss are very important. So we'll try to understand them, those articles in a very detailed manner. And before discussing these important articles, you all knew that there was a practice question that I have given to you yesterday, and the question was: India's first sunken museum was recently inaugurated by Union Culture Minister Gajendra Singh Shekhawat in which of the following cities? So that is the question, and the correct answer for this question is option C. The first sunken museum in India was inaugurated in Delhi, and we will look into the explanation part of this question. Now, India's first sunken museum, it is located in Humayun Tomb Complex, and Humayun Tomb Complex is located in Delhi. And in fact, it will have a grand opening ceremony. So in fact, already it was done July 29, 2024, a grand opening ceremony of this sunken museum that was at the Humayun Tomb Complex in New Delhi. And in fact, it will be open for the visitors starting from July 30. So starting from July 30, so from yesterday onwards, so this sunken museum will be open for the visitors. And in fact, the museum launch actually aligns with the 46th UNESCO World Heritage Committee session, and that has been taking place in New Delhi. In previous lectures also we have understood that this UNESCO World Heritage Committee meetings are regular. In fact, the meeting is going to be held in New Delhi. So this is the 46th meeting, and one of the cultural site from Assam, Moidams, also included in the UNESCO World Heritage list. So therefore, when we talk about Humayun's tomb, so Humayun's tomb is also a UNESCO World Heritage site, and it is also well known architectural and historical site, right? So when we talk about Humayun is a Mughal emperor, and he was the father of another Mughal emperor, Akbar, a great Mughal emperor Akbar, right? So it was constructed around 16th century by Akbar himself. Constructed this Humayun tomb for his father, and this monument is a prime example of Mughal heritage, and it actually stands as a key cultural landmark in Delhi. On the image you can see a Humayun tomb complex in Delhi, and in fact, when we talk about the Humayun tomb complex, it actually exemplifies the grandeur and even intricate design of Mughal architecture, highlighting the era's artistic and even the cultural significance of that particular architectural structure, right? So this is about the Humayun's tomb complex and first sunken museum in India. And next important question, this is a map based question, and this is also a very important question, right? Because frequently there are map based questions are also seen in the examination. And UPSC specifically focuses on Middle East. So Middle East is one of the favorite topic for the UPSC, and the question is: Mediterranean Sea is a border of which of the following countries, right? So Mediterranean Sea shares its borders with which of the following countries that were given here? So first country, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon and Syria, and you have to identify with which of the following countries Mediterranean Sea actually shares its borders. So this is simple and very question. You just look at map, and you also look at the Mediterranean Sea and its location and the countries with which the Mediterranean Sea has been sharing its borders. So accordingly, try to answer this question in the comment section. And without any delay, we'll proceed on to discuss the first important article, that is landslides in Wayanad, Kerala. And it is also one of the distressing news that several people have lost their lives, and even several people are also missing in this disastrous and a very unfortunate incident that has led to the death of hundreds of people. And in fact, landslides are not new to Kerala, and the Western Ghats are a very highly vulnerable to the landslides. There were in the past also there were several instances of landslides because of number of activities, the anthropogenic activities, the natural factors. So all these factors over a period of time contributing to the increasing frequency of landslides and even increasing intensity of landslides. But the major reason for the landslides is the increasing anthropogenic activities across these Western Ghats. For example, settlements over the mountainous areas, deforestation, illegal mining, and developmental projects. So all these factors have been the major causes of landslides in Kerala. And in fact, the frequency of these landslides further increased by the climate change. Right? So this is a very unfortunate incident, and in fact, the rescue teams have reached Kerala, and they're being part of a relief and rescue operation, and they are also searching for the people who are missing. But this is a very unfortunate incident, and we will also try to understand what are the basic or major reasons for the landslides, particularly in Western Ghats and Himalayan region, and even in Northeast India, because this year in Sikkim there was a massive landslide incident, and that has also claimed the lives of around 100 people. So we will understand what are the major reasons for these landslides across Western Ghats and Himalayas, and we will also try to understand so what should be done and what are the measures that the government has taken, because this as a topic is very, very important for your mains examination, especially the disaster management section. Not just the disaster management in general studies paper 3, but also general studies paper 1 as well, right? So when we talk about the incident that took place, so in this Wayanad landslide incident, around 122 people were killed, and 122 people were killed and more than 200 people were injured, and even number of people were also missing, because the multiple landslide events have occurred in a very small period of time, and these landslides have actually flattened some villages which are located on the foothills of these Western Ghats in the Wayanad district, and that was the reason for a large scale death of people due to the landslide. And in fact, there were a lot of images that are coming out in open, so indicating there are wide muddy slash on the the hillside across the Western Ghats, right? So the mud that we generally see in these images had slid down to bury the villages thousands of meters below, right? So in fact, the moving land mass, so the land mass just moving from the steep slopes of these mountains, right? So they just moving from steep slopes of these mountains, and whatever settlements that are located just at the foothills of these Western Ghats, the moving slid just buried every village, or people were also died in this incident. The moving land mass rode over the devastated locality, and in fact it also plunged into a nearby river. Now what happened was, this land mass plunged into the nearby river, right? So it was a nearby river, and the entire land mass is also the land mass which is carried by this moved by the landslide is deposited in the river, and that has led to river changing its course further, and two rivers were formed, and one river further inundated all nearby villages, and that has further increased the casualties, right? So that is another major problem with these landslides. Now what is a landslide? We need to understand, we'll try to understand what exactly is a landslide. So when we talk about landslide, it is a geographical phenomenon, right? So landslide is a geographical phenomenon, right? So this landslides are very often actually involve rapid or sudden movement of a mass of rock, or even soil, or even the debris of the mountainous parts. So they just move at a very high speed down the slope due to the influence of gravity, and in case if any villages or any settlements are located just below these mountains or at the foothills of the mountains, so due to these landslides they will be at a very high, so they will be impacted because of these landslides. So however, the definition of landslide is, it is a geological phenomenon, and this geological phenomenon involves sudden and rapid movement of mass of rock, debris, soil, so down under the slope due to the influence of gravity. Now there are basic characteristics of a landslide, so we will try to understand what are those characteristics of a landslide. Now when we talk about the landslide, so landslides generally originate in steep terrain slopes. Okay, there is a difference between gradual slope, so this can be a gradual slope of a mountain. Okay, so however, this can be a steep slope of the mountain. So so this can also be called as a gradual slope. Okay, so this can be a gradual slope, but this is a steep slope. And landslides, there is a high probability of landslides in these steep slopes. So whenever there is a high rainfall, whenever there is a volcanic activity or volcanic eruption, or whenever there is an earthquake, now what happens, the loose debris just move down at a very high speed, and they just inundate, or they just collide with the settlements that are located downslope, and that is where it results in mass killing of people, right? So in recent times, what has been happening, due to increased population, people are even clearing the forest areas, and they are even settling across these mountainous slopes, and that is where it has been the nature of the disaster or number of people impacted has been further increasing. So this is because of this reason. Okay, so apart from that, another characteristic is presence of joints and fissures within the mountains, right? So these joints and fissures, so very often prone to the volcanic eruption also, right? So volcanic eruption would also result in these landslides. So because it would result in a kind of a shaking of these mountains, right? So that would result in the loosened soil would just move down at a much higher speed, and presence of loosely packed or weathered material, right? So a material is very often loosely packed. So loosely packed material enables the quick movement of the debris, soil and land mass at a much faster pace, and that is also another characteristic. And any area which has been burned for wildfires. Now one thing that we need to remember is deforestation is one of the major reason for the landslides, because so when we talk about trees around these mountainous areas, trees have roots, right? So these roots very often bind the soil together. So therefore there is a less probability of landslide whenever there is a thick vegetation across these mountainous slopes. But due to commercialization, increasing population, increasing settlements over these mountainous areas, and even the slash and burn cultivation or shifting cultivation, or recent instances of wildfires due to climate change incidences, now what has been happening, the tree cover has been diminishing at a faster pace, and that has been resulting in landslides further. And apart from that, any area that has been modified in recent times due to developmental activities or any other infrastructure project, or to construct anything, forests are being cleared across these mountainous slopes, and that further increases the intensity and frequency of these landslides. So we will understand some causes of landslide, some basic causes of landslides. So understand one thing, that landslides are caused by both natural factors and anthropogenic factors also, right? So it is not that only anthropogenic factors are responsible for natural sites. So there is nothing like that. Both anthropogenic and natural causes are responsible for the landslides. Now when we talk about briefly about the natural causes, heavy rainfall is one of the reason for the landslides, right? So what happens with the heavy rainfall? Imagine a mountainous slope, right? So in this mountainous slope, if heavy rainfall has been taking place over a period of time, so it increases the weight of the soil, and heavy downpour across these mountainous areas so also create pores, and along with the pores it would loosen the soil, and weight of the soil would be further increased, and loosening and increasing weight of the soil would increase the incidence of these landslides. right? The soil would be saturated, and that would result in a landslide due to the heavy rainfall also. Now it is the time for southwest monsoon, and the windward side of the Western Ghats also receive heavy rainfall, and that is one reason for the landslides. And second reason, when we talk about the other natural factors which causes landslides, the clay and vegetation which is actually present within the soil or rock actually act as an element, right? For example, we need to talk about trees, right? So these trees actually bind the soil to their roots, right? So thereby there is a less chance that the soil would loosen and then it quickly moves downward. So there is no such probability. If there is a thick vegetation, the roots of the tree would actually bind the soil with these roots, and that will make there is a less susceptibility of landslides, forming landslides, right? Because the roots hold these particles together. However, by removing these cohesive elements, or that essentially means that by removing the vegetation over the mountain slopes, erosion would take place at a faster pace, and erosion would further increases the risk of heavy landslides. And another major factor is volcanic eruptions. Volcanic eruptions are also responsible for the landslides, because when volcanic eruption took place, the ash and other debris which are emerged from these volcanoes, they just deposit over the mountainous slopes over a period of time, and the ash and other debris which are volcanic origin, so they actually don't consolidate immediately, and they are very loose particles across the slopes, right? So whenever rainfall takes place, or whenever there is an earthquake like thing happens, all the debris which are deposited across the mountain slopes, so again they come down at a much quicker pace, and that would also trigger landslides as well. So these are some of the natural factors. Now we will try to understand some anthropogenic causes of this landslide. What exactly causes landslide? There are some anthropogenic factors which are also responsible for the landslides, and first and foremost thing in the anthropogenic factors is, in recent times these mountains are increasingly encroached upon for various activities. So that is one of the main reason, right? So when you look at the mountainous areas, you can see a lot of settlements, a lot of restaurants were being built, a lot of infrastructure projects are laid down, and illegal mining has also been taking place at a rampant pace, and deforestation has also been taking place at a much higher pace. So all these comes under the encroachment of these vulnerable terrains, right? So human beings have started encroaching upon these vulnerable areas or disaster prone areas such as hilly terrains. So hilly terrains are very often highly vulnerable to landslides. So therefore this has been led to increased construction activities, right? So in recent times what has been happening, the encroachment of these mountainous terrains has led to the increased construction activities for commercial purposes, and even for human settlements have increased a lot. So that has also resulted in a large scale deforestation. So large scale deforestation coupled with the encroachment of these hilly terrains, so what has been happening, whenever such incidents takes place, the natural incidences takes place, it would trigger a landslide, and the intensity of the landslide would be further enhanced by the both deforestation, and it would causes a greater damage because of the commercial activities down the slope. Okay, so even there is also unauthorized or poorly planned excavation activities which are taking place across these mountainous slopes. Now when we talk about these excavation activities, the most important are mining, especially the illegal mining across these mountainous slopes, and even quarrying is also another aspect of it. And when illegal mining, quarrying has been taking place at an indiscriminate level, so that could destabilize the slopes. Okay, so destabilizing slope essentially means that it would trigger, so if there is any trigger event, then that could trigger a landslide, and landslide would result in a major disaster, and it causes a greater damage for existing infrastructure. It would lead to the loss of lives and even the loss of property also. However, experts have been arguing that the climate change has also further increased the intensity on the frequency of the landslide incidents, both Himalayas and across the Western Ghats incidents also, because as of now we can say that the climate change coupled with the anthropogenic activities have been causing a very frequent landslides, because climate change has changed the precipitation patterns in the sense that some parts have been getting a lot of rainfall. Okay, so it has changed the precipitation patterns, and temperatures are also increasing. Due to temperatures there are wildfires, so wildfires have been resulted in clearing of these forests across these mountainous slopes, right? So the frequency of extreme weather events has also significantly increased, and that has in turn have increased the frequency as well as the severity of these landslides. So these are both natural causes and anthropogenic causes of the landslides. However, we need to talk about the measures that the government has taken. Okay, so government has taken a number of measures to deal with the landslides, and the areas which are highlighted in green color are the areas which are vulnerable to landslides. So you can see the entire Northeast India is vulnerable to landslides, right? So the entire Northeast India is vulnerable to landslides, which is located in the Eastern Himalayas, and even the Western Himalayas are also highly vulnerable to the landslides, including Sikkim also. And apart from that, entire Western Ghats are highly vulnerable to these landslides. However, we need to talk about some measures that the government has undertaken in recent times to deal with the landslides. The first important legislation which could deal with the landslides and the damage which is being caused by landslides is Disaster Management Act of 2005. Right, the Disaster Management Act of 2005 actually provided a comprehensive legal and institutional framework, right? So there is a set of legal and institutional framework, and this particular framework would manage various disasters, and that includes landslides as well. Okay, so it would manage the landslides along with other major disaster, whether it is earthquakes, cyclones, or floods, droughts. So all these things are being managed by the National Disaster Management Act. Rather, it has provided an institutional and a legal framework. And secondly, National Landslide Risk Management Strategy was initiated by the Union government in the year 2019. And in fact, the National Landslide Risk Management Strategy also cover all aspect of landslide, right? So it covers all aspect of landslide and disaster risk reduction and management, such as it deals with the hazard mapping, it deals with the monitoring, and even it deals with the early warning systems as well, right? So all these measures have been already put in place to effectively deal with the landslides and even the relief and rescue in case of any such events took place. And National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, has also issued guidelines in the past. Okay, so with respect to the landslide hazard management in the year 2019, and they actually outline number of steps and that should be taken to reduce the risk of landslides. And one thing that we need to remember here, we need to identify the landslide prone areas or landslide vulnerable areas, and we need to come up with certain construction regulations in the landslide prone areas, and that is very, very important. And afforestation has to be increased. And secondly, we need to be more and more sensitive when it comes to developing infrastructure projects in ecologically fragile areas like Western Ghats and Eastern Himalayas, because that could further trigger these landslides, especially construction of highways, construction of railways, and hydroelectricity projects. And illegal mining has to be curbed at any cost, and commercial activities also should not be permitted in the landslide prone areas, and these measures have to be taken place. And next article that we are going to discuss is also another very important article, so that is a legal advisory council. So what is the need for establishing a legal advisory council? And this editorial is being given in the Hindu newspaper, right? So we'll understand the context of this article. The context is that, in fact, so experts have been suggesting that there is a need for constructing, or there is a need to set up a legal advisory council to the government, like how we have the economic advisory council to the prime minister. In a similar way, we need to have a legal advisory council, and this legal advisory council will provide legal insights to the government, right? So it will provide legal insights to the government, whether it is about important legislations, whether it is about the matters of with respect to judiciary. So everything will be advised by this legal advisory council to the government on the lines of economic advisory council. So the context is that a legal advisory council has to be set up or has to be established, and a legal insights from such a well structured think tanks such as legal advisory councils can be very important and very crucial for clarifying the true intent of specific legislation for the government. So if government wanted to bring some important legislations, and in order to clarify the true intent of such legislation, this legal advisory council is very, very important, whether to the government or to the normal people also. Right. So we need to talk about the need for a structured legal inputs. So what is the need for such a structured legal inputs? And that has, pointing towards the fact or towards the need for setting up this legal advisory council. Right. So when we talk about the handling of the legal issues by the present National Democratic Alliance government or NDA government, so experts have been suggesting that the handling of these legal issues by the NDA government is inadequate. And in fact, the legal experts have also been pointing out there is a need for a continuous, well-informed and empirically valid legal inputs. Right, so there is a need for all those things from a well-structured think tanks, particularly the legal advisory council. So this legal advisory council regularly advises the government over different legislations, right? So that the true intent of the legislations can actually be found out, and the government will also be clear. And whatever apprehensions that the opposition have, that the people have with respect to one single legislation, can also be clarified, because all legal luminaries are being part of the legal advisory council. And in fact, establishing such a legal advisory council similar to the economic advisory council of Prime Minister, so could actually provide Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers with a timely legal analysis and insights and inputs over different legislations. So thereby it would help preempt the legal challenges, and it would also enhance the legislative process over a period of time. Now one thing that we need to remember here, so imagine that the government has come up with the electoral bond scheme. However, the Supreme Court has declared the electoral bond scheme as unconstitutional because it is violating Article 19 of the Indian Constitution, that is the right of citizens to information. Right. So whenever such legal advisory councils are there, so those councils regularly inform, provide insights, provide analysis over these different pieces of legislations to the government. Right. So appropriate legislations can be framed by the government, and those legislations can also be protected from challenges or legally challenging. Okay. So when we talk about any such think tank, so the think tanks like legal advisory councils, if they are established, so they actually have expert legal and policy analysis, right? So they do expert legal and policy analysis of different legislations. So if we have a well structured think tanks, and those think tanks would actually provide informed and even empirical legal analysis, and that can enhance the legislative process, right? So it could actually enhance the legislative process of it. However, so it also provides the evidence-based decision making also. So evidence-based decision making, data-driven decision making is also very, very important when it comes to the policy formulation, making different laws. Evidence-based decision making and data-driven decision making is a very, very crucial aspect. However, whenever a legal advisory council is being constituted, it could significantly contribute to the evidence-based decision making. Right. So because when such advisory council is established for a specific purpose, so it would conduct a research on different matters, right? So it would conduct research, and it would have adequate data, it would have adequate evidence, so that would provide insights into the complex legal and social issues also. And now we'll talk about some recent legal issues where the government has come up with certain policies, certain legislations, and those legislations were challenged in the Supreme Court, right? So firstly, as I have already discussed before, that electoral bond scheme, right? So electoral bond scheme, so it was also challenged Electoral bond scheme was also challenged in the Supreme Court. However, in order to bring in transparency and accountability in the electoral funding, the government has brought the electoral bond scheme, but these electoral bonds were challenged in the Supreme Court, and ultimately Supreme Court declared that the electoral bond scheme is unconstitutional. Why? Because it has been violating the right to information of the voters. So on this pretext, the court has declared that the electoral bond scheme is unconstitutional. And similarly, the government before also framed the Aadhaar, Targeted Delivery of Financial and Other Subsidies Benefit Services Act of 2016. Right? So government already framed this particular piece of legislation. And in fact, this legislation, Supreme Court, this legislation was also challenged in the Supreme Court. Right, the Puttaswamy judgment, right to privacy. So all these things are increasingly challenged in the Supreme Court. And when we have such a legal advisory council, which actually do a lot of research and analysis, and it would also provide government with adequate insights over different policies and legislations, and that would actually make that would actually result in framing better policies and legislations, right? So however, it is not free from the challenges. There are certain challenges also. Okay, so proposed a legal advisory council would actually conduct the legal analysis. So there is no doubt that if such a body is constituted, it would conduct the legal analysis of different issues which are being referred to it by the government, right? So in fact, it also performs the suo motu, or a research on different legal matters or legal issues on its own. Okay, so for that particular purpose, so it was established. Now whenever it has been providing as an advice to the government, of course it has to do a detailed analysis of different aspects, right? So therefore it would allow the proactive identification of potential legal challenges. And the other thing that we need to talk about is engagement with the national law universities is very, very important aspect, right? Because we actually have a lot of legal expertise at the national law universities. So when we talk about such a national legal advisory council, we need to engage the expertise in the national law universities, and that could further enhance the legal consultancy process, the legal advisory council, and it would also ensure that the laws that are being framed by the legislature or by the government are constitutionally valid, viable, and even socially acceptable as well. And in fact, the legal advisory council, if it is constituted, a regular research inputs from different institutions across the country, legal experts, so they actually aid in formulating the better legislation, and even that would address the legal challenges before they actually escalate. However, so when we talk about the way forward of it, now in the way forward, the legal advisory council should actually comprises of a number of stakeholders. For example, it should consist of legal experts, eminent jurists, academicians, researchers who are having specialization in the field of law, right? So apart from that, government officials who have specialization in criminal law, trade law, international law, business law, and even taxation laws. So all stakeholders have to be part of the legal advisory council to make sure that the legal advisory council would give a better analysis, a better insights over different legislations to the government of India. And in fact, so there is a need for establishing formal mechanisms, and these formal mechanisms should focus on ensuring collaboration between different stakeholders, different agencies and institutions, such as a committee for reforms in the criminal laws at the National Law University, Delhi, that was established by Ministry of Home Affairs, right? So it was established by Ministry of Home Affairs to facilitate the exchange of ideas, research between the government and academia. So such formal mechanisms have to be established for a collaboration between all these agencies and institutions. And next important article is very important. It is about Indian Army recently launched e-Sehat teleconsultancy portal, right? So this is e-Sehat teleconsultancy portal. Now what is a teleconsultancy? What does it mean when I say teleconsultancy, right? So you no need to go to the hospital physically, Rather, through a digital mode, you can get the consultancy services from a qualified doctor. So that is a teleconsultancy services. And Indian Army, actually to benefit the veterans and serving Indians, so Indian Army personnel e-Sehat portal, a teleconsultancy portal is actually launched. Okay, so when we talk about the teleconsultancy or telehealth, there are a number of benefits. Okay, so for example, there will be an improved access to healthcare and cost effectiveness. You no need to travel to long distances to go to the hospital to talk to the doctor, and even it improves the quality, and there's also a lot of consumer demand in this area as well. A lot of benefits and number of services are being provided, right? So it also cost effective. So we will understand what exactly is this Sehat portal, right? So when we talk about the Sehat portal, so it is the ex-serviceman contributory health scheme, right? So the ex-serviceman contributory health scheme, and this ex-serviceman contributory health scheme has launched electronic service e-health assistance and telecommunication module, right? So this is e-Sehat module. I'm repeating it again. So this is electronic services, e-health assistance and telecommunication module. And what is the total overall objective of this module? It will provide healthcare services through safe and structured video based clinical consultations, right? So it would actually provide healthcare services through a structured video based and clinical consultation. So when we talk about this particular module of e-Sehat module that is being launched by ex-serviceman contributory health scheme, so it actually adheres to telemedicine practice, even guidelines which are being issued by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare in consultation with Niti Aayog of March 2020. And in fact, it also ensures the seamless implementation and even exemption or expansion of the project. So the IT hardware equipment have been provided to all 24/7, all 427 the ex-serviceman contributory health scheme polyclinics and staff were also given adequate training over the online medical advice, because telemedicine essentially means that you need to give doctors and the medical staff need to give advice or need to give adequate precautions, everything to the army personnel looking after their reports digitally. So therefore the future phases will actually include the pre-consultation, and it also includes vital checks, home delivery of medicines, and even referral to the empaneled hospitals by the medical officers. So all these things actually do take place with respect to this e-Sehat module that is being launched by ex-serviceman contributory health scheme. And this e-Sehat initiative aligns with India's Digital India vision. So we have a Digital India vision, so where the digitalization of India is the objective of Digital India vision. So it would be aligned with the Digital India vision of the government, and in fact it also aimed at promoting the digital inclusivity and even efficiency in the public services. And this pioneering effort will actually help in transforming the healthcare delivery, especially the telemedicine will help in further transforming the healthcare delivery for veterans, and it would also ensure timely and quality medical attention from the comfort of their respective homes. So that is the teleservices or telemedicine, so and a part of the e-Sehat portal, right? So today we have some important mains practice question, so we'll try to answer this question, right? So this question I have given to you in the backdrop of the landslides in Western Ghats, right? So how these landslides in Western Ghats, there are a number of threats that the Western Ghats have been facing, and those threats are the main reason. The threats that these Western Ghats have been facing, they are the main reason for increasing such instances of landslides and killing number of people. The question is, what are the major anthropogenic threats to the Western Ghats, right? So Western Ghats have been facing number of anthropogenic threats, and what measures have been taken to protect the ecology of these Western Ghats. discuss. So this is the question. And firstly, so when how to structure this answer. Now when we talk about structuring an answer, so this is how you need to structure answer. So firstly, you need to briefly introduce about Western Ghats, right? So briefly introduce about the Western Ghats. So that would be enough. Just write a very briefly. So it should not be more than 25 to 30 words, right? So it should not be more than 25 to 30 words. So you just briefly introduce about the Western Ghats. And after writing an introduction, so you can also draw a map, and you can also locate where these Western Ghats are located, because that would further add value to your answer. And after writing introduction, you just go and address the first part of the answer, that is, what are the major anthropogenic threats to the Western Ghats. So you need to address this part. So right, so in the second part, write anthropogenic threats to the Western Ghats, and next you need to address the measures that have been taken by the government to protect the ecology of the Western Ghats, and conclude this answer by actually suggesting an appropriate way forward, right? So this is the actual structure and approach of the answer. So as I have already told you, that just briefly introduce about the Western Ghats. Okay, so Western Ghats are 1600 kilometer long a mountain chain. In fact, when we talk about the Western Ghats, so Western Ghats, unlike the Eastern Ghats, are continuous mountain chain. So there are no breaks in the Western Ghats. So they are continuous mountain chain of 1600 kilometers. They are located in different states, right from Tamil Nadu up to Gujarat. So they are actually running parallel across the western coast of India, and they're located north from Tapi River in the north to Kanyakumari in the south. And in fact, the states through which these Western Ghats actually passes through, because this was also a question asked by UPSC prelims examination in the past. So Western Ghats actually passes through 6 states. Okay, so they pass through 6 states. They include Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. And in fact, Western Ghats are called with different names. In different states, Western Ghats have different names. For example, in Maharashtra they are being called as Sahyadris, and in Karnataka they are being called as Nilgiris. So there are different names for the Western Ghats, and this is how you need to introduce this answer. And secondly, you can briefly write about the significance. Before writing about the threats, the anthropogenic threats, you can, if you want, you can briefly write about the significance of the Western Ghats also, right? So when we talk about the significance of the Western Ghats are a source of perennial rivers. In fact, a large number of perennial rivers in the peninsular India. And in the peninsular India, agriculture is being sustained by the rivers which are being originating from these Western Ghats. The famous and most important rivers are Godavari River, Krishna River, and Kaveri River. They are very, very important rivers, and they generally origin from Western Ghats. And in fact, the peninsular India also receives the most of the water supply from all these rivers which are being originating from the Western Ghats. And in fact, Western Ghats also play a very, very important role in increasing the Indian monsoon and weather patterns also in the Indian subcontinent, not just in the entire Indian subcontinent, not just in peninsular India, but in the entire Indian subcontinent, right? So because of the Western Ghats, so there is a heavy rainfall along the western coast. So you can briefly write about the significance of the Western Ghats, and then you proceed on to address the threats that these Western Ghats have been facing. Now, the first and foremost threat these Western Ghats have been facing, there are a number of threats. For example, deforestation is a threat, right? So deforestation and illegal encroachment, illegal mining of these Western Ghats. And even the increased commercial activities and increased human settlements across these Western Ghats, deforestation, and the shifting cultivations. All these are threats, right? So what has been happening, the forests are being cleared for all these activities, right? So when forests are being cleared, it will have a multiplier effect, a negative multiplier effect on the Western Ghats. And we can say that these factors are to some extent are responsible for the present disaster in Kerala that has claimed the lives of hundreds of people. Okay, because all these activities have been further increasing the vulnerability of the Western Ghats. And apart from that, when we talk about the other factors, even human activities or human communities which are living very close to these Western Ghats, or Western Ghats are very sensitive and they're also very fragile in its nature. So therefore it is very important that we should not undertake activities which actually disturb the sensitive nature of these Western Ghats. Okay, so extraction of the resources from these forest areas, clearing forests, so all these factors have been contributing to the damage to the nature of the Western Ghats, or even increasing the vulnerability of Western Ghats to various other disasters. And livestock grazing is another problem within and bordering protected areas, and that is also a serious problem, and it has been causing the habitat degradation across these Western Ghats. And apart from that, plantations such as agroforestry. So agroforestry is good. There's no doubt that agroforestry damages the Western Ghats, but it is very important that the farming should be taken up in a sustainable manner, and that is very important. And the agriculture in the Western Ghats very often replacing the native and endemic plant species, right? So when we talk about the endemic plant species, those are plant species which are found in Western Ghats only, which are available in Western Ghats only. They are endemic plant species. However, in recent times there is an increased tea plantation, coffee plantation, rubber plantation, and even monocultural practices. So all these practices have been replacing the existing endemic and native ecosystems, right? So that has been resulting in increased damage to the natural ecosystem of Western Ghats. And even encroachment is also another problem. Illegal mining is also another problem. Developmental projects such as hydroelectricity projects, railways, roadways are being laid across these Western Ghats, and that has resulted in clearing forest, habitat fragmentation. Now all these factors are emerged as a threats to the Western Ghats sensitive ecosystem. And one thing that we need to remember, Western Ghats are identified as a biodiversity hotspots, and hence it is very, very important to protect these biodiversity hotspots. However, when we talk about the measures that the government has already taken to protect the Western Ghats, we need to talk about two important committees with respect to the Western Ghats. So one committee that the government has appointed in the year 2011 to look after the Western Ghats and suggest some recommendations to protect and conserve the Western Ghats. So one committee was Gadgil Committee and second committee was Kasturi Rangan Committee in the year 2013. And in fact, Madhav Gadgil Committee, so it is this Madhav Gadgil Committee is also known as Western Ghats Ecology Expert Panel, right? So this is known as Western Ghats Ecology Expert Panel. And this ecology expert panel has recommended that all of the Western Ghats should be declared as the ecological sensitive areas, and that essentially means that declaring Western Ghats as ecologically sensitive areas means that the activities would be restricted in the ecologically sensitive areas. The anthropogenic activities, developmental activities would be restricted in the Western Ghats, especially the ecological sensitive areas. However, the Madhav Gadgil Committee has recommended that all of the Western Ghats should be identified or should be declared as ecologically sensitive areas. However, in these ecological sensitive areas, only a limited developmental activities should be allowed, right? So similarly, Kasturi Rangan Committee 2013 was appointed by the government again, right? So the Kasturi Rangan Committee sought to balance the development with the environmental protection. Now, when we talk about the Madhav Gadgil Committee unilaterally focused on the conservation of the environment, sidelining or giving less priority and less importance to the development in the Western Ghats region. However, the Kasturi Rangan Committee tried to balance between environmental conservation and development also. Okay, so this was in contrast to the system that was proposed by the Madhav Gadgil Committee. And in fact, the Kasturi Rangan Committee has recommended that 37% of the total area should be brought under the ecologically sensitive area, and there should be a complete ban on mining, quarrying and sand mining which is being declared as the ecological sensitive area. And apart from that, hydroelectricity projects or any other infrastructure projects or commercial agriculture. So there are a number of restrictions which are being imposed in the ecologically sensitive areas as per the Kasturi Rangan committee, right? So what should be the way forward in this question? So you can also write a brief way forward like a conclusion, right? So there is a need for the better understanding of the role of biodiversity in ecosystem. So how biodiversity functions, how ecosystem functions, how biodiversity and ecosystem are very, very important, how they are interlinked, and how it actually helps the human populations, how these services are being provided by the ecosystem. So we need to understand everything, and we need to have a greater knowledge about this thing, and this would also help in further enhancing the awareness among the people and the civil society about the ecosystem services and the biodiversity. So therefore there will be an increased and enhanced support as well as the political will to conserve the Western Ghats. And apart from that, it is also very, very important that we need to balance the conservation with the developmental activities. So the land use policy and law enforcement, both land use policy and law enforcement should ensure that the illegal hunting, deforestation, land use change and other human actions that actually contribute to livelihoods, but they also hamper biodiversity conservation, so they should be kept in check. So this is how you can actually write a way forward, suggesting some measures and conclude the answer, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. If you like our work, so please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.